Welcome to Echoes of Ihsan Podcast. Today we're going deep into Sahih Bukhari,
Okay.
specifically Book 10,
Okay.
Times of the Prayers. We're going to be really unpacking,
Yeah.
the when and the
Yeah.
how the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, did his 5 daily prayers.
Right.
And you might be surprised to learn that there's a lot more to it than just,
Yeah.
dawn, noon, afternoon, sunset, and night.
Hmm.
We got stories, we got examples. We even got a little bit of
Yeah.
debate going on as people were trying to
Oh, yeah.
understand all this stuff.
Totally.
So this is going to be, I think, a really unique
I
glimpse
think so.
into history and spirituality.
Definitely.
So let's get started.
Sounds good.
So first things first, for anyone listening who might not be, super familiar with this, Sahih Bukhari is one of the most
Important.
respected collections of hadith,
For sure.
the sayings and actions of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him,
Absolutely.
like a
It's a guidebook.
guide
Yeah.
for Muslims,
For sure.
offering insight into how he lived
Yeah.
and practiced his faith.
And Book 10 specifically focuses on the 5 daily prayers.
Right.
Fajr, Zuhr, Asr, Maghrib, and Isha.
Right.
And these prayers, along with belief in God, charity, fasting during Ramadan, and performing Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca,
Yep.
those are the 5 pillars of Islam.
Okay.
They're the foundation of the faith.
So we're talking about something super core to Islam.
Totally.
And right away, really hit on this.
Yeah, they really highlight how prayer is inseparable from belief in God and giving charity.
Okay.
So it's like
Yeah.
they all form the basis of a Muslim's relationship with God and with your community. You can't have one without the others.
Right. It's like a 3-legged stool.
Yeah.
You need all of them
Yeah,
for it to stand.
for sure.
And then Hadith 505 goes even further. It says that offering prayers at their designated times is the most beloved deed to Allah.
Wow.
So it makes you think about how much weight that carries.
Definitely.
It's not just about praying, it's about the timing and the discipline.
It is. It speaks to a sense of order and commitment.
Yeah.
It's about prioritizing your connection with God at specific moments throughout the day, weaving it into the fabric of your life.
Yeah. And there's this beautiful metaphor in Hadith 506 that I really liked.
Okay.
It compares the 5 daily prayers to bathing 5 times a day in a river,
Oh, wow.
cleansing yourself of sins.
I love that.
To such a vivid image, you can just feel the water washing away the impurities.
Yeah, it really speaks to the purifying nature of prayer. It's not just about going through the motions. It's a spiritual cleansing, a chance to reset
Yeah.
and start fresh throughout the day.
Okay, so let's dive into some specifics about the individual prayers.
Okay, sounds good.
Starting with Zuhr, the early afternoon prayer. So one of the first things that you'll notice is this recurring theme of delaying the Zuhr prayer
Okay.
during extreme heat.
Oh, wow.
It comes up again and again
Okay.
in Hadiths 510, 511, 512, 513, and 514.
Interesting. So
So-
it seems like it was a pretty common practice.
I love this because it shows how practical
Yeah.
and merciful Islamic teachings are.
Yeah.
Imagine living in, the scorching desert heat.
Right?
You wouldn't want to be standing in the sun at the hottest part of the day.
Absolutely not.
And it makes you think about the context of these
Yeah,
practices.
For sure.
And there's this incredible image in Hadith 512
Okay.
where hellfire itself
Oh.
is complaining to God about the heat
Wow.
and is allowed to breathe
Oh, my goodness.
during the hottest times of the year.
That's intense.
It's like even hellfire needs a break
Yeah.
from the heat.
Yeah.
But seriously, it paints this vivid picture of just how intense the heat was.
Yeah.
So it makes you appreciate that delaying the prayer wasn't just a suggestion. It was
it was necessary.
necessary.
Yeah.
But then we see a slightly different practice in Hadith 515.
Okay.
The Prophet, peace be upon him, offers the Zuhr prayer as the sun declines from its zenith at midday.
Okay.
So it's a little different than the previous hadiths,
Mm-hmm.
which makes you wonder if maybe the intensity of the heat varied
Yeah.
or if there were other factors at play.
Right.
So it shows that there's some flexibility
Okay.
in Islamic teachings,
Right.
right? Adapting to specific situations.
It's not about being rigid.
Yeah,
It's about understanding the spirit of the practice
right.
and applying it wisely.
And speaking of practical considerations,
Yeah.
Hadith 517 describes people prostrating on their clothes to protect themselves from the scorching ground.
Wow.
So it's this beautiful balance of religious observance
Yeah.
and recognizing real-world conditions.
It's a reminder that Islam isn't about blind adherence to rules.
Right.
It's about understanding the essence of the practice and applying it with wisdom and compassion.
So even in something as seemingly straightforward as the timing of Zuhr prayer,
Yeah.
we see this nuance and consideration.
Okay, so now let's move on to the late afternoon prayer, Azhar.
Okay.
The tone here seems to shift a bit,
Oh.
with some pretty strong warnings
Okay.
in Hadiths 527 and 528 against missing this prayer.
Interesting. So,
There's definitely a sense of urgency here.
Yeah.
Missing the Azhar prayer is likened to losing one's family and property.
wow.
It really emphasizes its importance.
Yeah.
It's not something to be taken lightly.
It's a powerful image for sure.
Yeah.
And then Hadith 530 adds another layer to this.
Okay.
He says that angels are gathering at the times of Azhar and Fajr prayers to report on people's actions
Wow.
to God.
Okay.
So it's a reminder that we're accountable
Yeah.
for our choices,
Absolutely.
even the seemingly small ones.
It makes you think.
Yeah.
Knowing that our actions are being witnessed, are we living in a way that aligns with our values and beliefs?
It's heavy stuff.
It is.
But even with all this emphasis on not delaying us, there's this bit of reassurance
Okay.
in Hadith 531.
Okay.
It says it's permissible to complete even one rak'ah before sunset.
Okay.
So it's like Islam is saying, don't delay, but if you're late, do what you can.
I like that.
It's this balance of urgency
Yeah.
and understanding.
It emphasizes the importance of the prayer
Yeah.
while also acknowledging human fallibility. It's not about being perfect, but about making a sincere effort.
Yeah. There are these two really intriguing hadiths,
Okay.
532 and 533,
Okay.
that use the Az prayer symbolically.
Okay.
It's described as the time when Muslims received the Quran and were granted double the reward
Wow.
compared to earlier religious communities.
Okay.
I'm curious, what do you make of that?
That's really interesting.
Why is Azhar singled out?
It does make you wonder about the spiritual significance of
Yeah.
this specific time of day.
Yeah.
Why is it considered so special?
Yeah. What is it about this time period that makes it so unique?
Yeah, definitely something to ponder.
It really gets you thinking. Okay, let's move on to Maghrib.
Okay.
The sunset prayer,
Mm-hmm.
Hadiths 534, 535, and 536, are pretty consistent here.
Okay.
It's offered right after sunset.
Okay.
No debate or variation, it seems.
Yeah, there's a clear emphasis on performing the Maghrib prayer.
Yeah,
As soon as the sun dips below the horizon,
right,
it's a moment of transition,
Yeah.
marking the end of the day and the beginning of the night.
right.
It's a time to pause and reflect on the day that has passed and prepare for the night ahead.
But there is one interesting detail
Okay.
in Hadith 538,
Okay.
where the Prophet, peace be upon him, corrects people who use the term Isha
Mm-hmm.
for the Maghrib prayer. It makes you wonder if maybe there was some confusion or even
Yeah.
cultural differences around the names of the prayers
Right.
at the time.
It reminds us that even in the early days of Islam,
Yeah.
there were variations in language and understanding. And the Prophet's clarification emphasizes the importance of using the correct terminology
Say.
to ensure clarity and avoid misunderstandings.
Okay, now on to Isha, the night prayer.
Okay.
This is where things get really interesting in terms of flexibility.
Okay.
Hadiths 535 and 540
Mm-hmm.
show that the Prophet, peace be upon him, sometimes prayed Isha early
Okay.
when people gathered,
Mm-hmm.
and other times delaying it when fewer people were present.
Interesting.
So it raises the question, communal practices versus individual circumstances. How do
Okay.
those play out?
It seems the Prophet was sensitive to both
Okay.
adapting the timing of the prayer
Yeah.
to accommodate the needs of the community,
Yeah.
while also recognizing the realities of people's lives.
Right.
It's a balancing act,
Yeah.
finding that sweet spot
Right.
between communal obligations and individual circumstances.
And those individual circumstances really come into play.
Yeah.
In Hadiths 541, 542, 544, 545, 546, and 574.
Wow. Okay.
So in these accounts, the Prophet delays the Isha prayer significantly,
Okay.
sometimes even till midnight.
Wow. So
But-
it's fascinating to see the reasons given for these delays and the reactions of those who are waiting. Sometimes he's busy with other matters. Other times he seems to be intentionally waiting.
Right.
It makes you wonder what factors influence these decisions and what message he might have been conveying
Yeah.
through these delays.
And Hadith 539 adds another layer
Okay.
to this.
Okay.
The Prophet, peace be upon him, delays the Isha prayer And then he delivers this really thought-provoking message about the importance of that particular night.
Wow.
So you can imagine the atmosphere.
Yeah.
The anticipation, the weight of his words after the delay.
For sure.
So it's not just about prayer.
Yeah.
It's about reflection and connection.
It's a powerful reminder that prayer isn't simply about fulfilling an obligation. It's about connecting with God, seeking guidance, and finding meaning in our lives.
Now let's shift to Fajr, the dawn prayer.
Yeah.
We see this consistent practice of praying while it's still dark.
Okay.
In Hadiths 535, 540, and 552.
Interesting.
So it's a really special time, that stillness before the day begins.
There's a unique spiritual atmosphere to that time of day. It's quiet, peaceful, a time for introspection and connection.
And there's this Hadith 548 that calls Fajr and Az the cool prayers.
Cool prayers.
Stating that those who pray them will enter paradise.
Wow.
It's an interesting phrase, cool prayers.
It is.
What do you think that signifies? Why are these specific prayers highlighted?
That makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Perhaps it's because these prayers require a bit more effort and discipline.
Okay.
Fajr demands waking up before dawn, while Azr often coincides with work or other worldly obligations.
Right.
Maybe those who prioritize these prayers, even when it's not convenient, demonstrate a deeper level of commitment and devotion.
It's about going above and beyond, putting your faith first, even when life gets busy.
Absolutely.
Hadiths 549 and 550 give us a glimpse into the Prophet's routine.
Okay.
Regarding the Fajr prayer.
Okay.
So he would have a pre-dawn meal and then pray after a short interval.
Okay.
Just enough time to recite a few verses of the Quran.
It shows how he balanced his physical and spiritual needs. He didn't rush into prayer immediately after eating, but allowed a brief interval for digestion and preparation.
Right. And then we see Sahl bin Sa'd's dedication in Hadith 531.
Okay.
He's eager to join the Prophet, peace be upon him, for Fajr prayer.
Yeah.
Even after having a pre-dawn meal.
Wow.
So he doesn't let the meal be an excuse to miss the prayer.
It speaks to the importance of prioritizing prayer, even amidst our daily activities. It's not something we do just when it's convenient. It's woven into the fabric of our lives.
And then there's this beautiful image in Hadith 552 of women attending Fajr prayer veiled in darkness.
Wow, that's powerful.
So it's really a powerful scene.
Yeah.
Highlighting the universality of prayer.
Yeah.
Transcending social distinctions. Everyone is equal in the eyes of God.
It speaks to the importance of women's participation in congregational prayer and creates this atmosphere of anonymity and focus during the early morning prayer.
Yeah.
It's a time for deep connection, free from distractions.
Okay, now let's talk about something strictly prohibited.
Okay.
Prayer at sunrise and sunset.
Okay.
Hadiths 555, 556, 557, 558, 559, 560.
Wow, that's a lot.
And 562 all emphasize this restriction.
So it's a pretty clear message.
Yeah, it's a pretty clear message.
The prohibition is very explicit.
Yes.
It makes you wonder why these specific times are singled out.
Yeah, why?
Maybe it has something to do with the symbolic significance
Right.
of these transitional moments between day and night.
It's like these are sacred times.
Yeah.
A pause in the day.
Yeah.
Not meant for formal prayer.
And in Hadith 563, Ibn Umar provides a helpful clarification.
Okay.
He states that prayer is permissible at any time, except during sunrise and sunset.
Okay.
This emphasizes the specific timings of the restriction, drawing a clear boundary.
Right. So it's not about avoiding prayer altogether,
Yeah.
but specifically refraining from formal prayer.
It's an interesting distinction.
It is. It's a nuanced understanding that highlights the importance of respecting these sacred times of transition in the natural world.
There's a time and place for everything.
Yeah.
And sunrise and sunset seem to hold a special significance.
Okay. Now, we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
But there's this other interesting debate around praying 2 optional rakat after the Azr prayer.
Okay.
This comes up in Hadith 561, 564, 565, 566, and 567.
Interesting.
What's your take on this?
It's a great example of how different interpretations can arise within a religious tradition, even about something seemingly straightforward like this.
Yeah. So on one hand, we have Muawiyah stating that he never witnessed the Prophet performing these 2 rakat after Azr, and that the Prophet had explicitly forbidden them.
Okay.
But then we have Aisha, the Prophet's wife, vehemently defending this practice.
Wow.
Insisting that the Prophet never missed these prayers, even towards the end of his life when standing for prayer became difficult.
It's fascinating to see such contrasting viewpoints.
Yeah.
It really encourages us to consider the complexities of interpreting religious texts and practices. There can be multiple valid perspectives within a faith tradition, and it's important to approach these differences with respect and understanding.
So it's a reminder that Islam isn't monolithic.
Exactly.
There's room for different interpretations and practices. As long as they're grounded.
As long as they're grounded.
In the core principles.
In the core principles.
Of the Quran and Sunnah.
Right. And it's about engaging with these texts actively. Understanding the reasoning behind different viewpoints. And forming our own informed conclusions. It's not about blindly following. It's about understanding and applying the teachings in a way that makes sense for our own lives.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
Exploring the nuances of timing for several of the daily prayers. What do you think stands out as the most significant theme so far?
For me, it's the interplay between consistency and flexibility.
Okay.
While there are clear guidelines for the timing of prayers, there's also a recognition that life is unpredictable, and there are times when adjustments need to be made. The Prophet's example shows us that it's about finding a balance, prioritizing our connection with God, while also being mindful of our own needs and the needs of those around us.
That's a great observation.
Thank you.
It's not about rigid adherence to a set schedule. It's about making prayer a meaningful and integrated part of our lives, adapting as needed, while maintaining the core principles.
Absolutely.
It's a beautiful reminder that our faith should be a source of comfort and guidance, not a burden or a source of stress. So with that in mind, let's move on to some more specific examples and stories that highlight the lived experience of prayer in the early days of Islam.
Sounds good. Yeah, it really is fascinating to see how these practices were kind of woven into the fabric of daily life, you know?
So speaking of daily life, we've talked about the timing of the prayers, but what about the way they were performed? Were there specific practices or challenges they encountered?
Absolutely. The hadiths offer some really intriguing insights into the practical side of prayer during the Prophet's time. Like, for instance, Hadith 507 gives us the sense of almost nostalgia, maybe even concern from Anas bin Malik, who was a close companion of the Prophet. He talks about how, you know, things aren't the same as they were during the Prophet's time, particularly regarding prayer. So it makes you wonder what specific changes he was noticing and why they troubled him.
It's almost like he's sensing a drift from the original practices. Maybe a shift in the way prayer was being approached or performed. What do you think he was trying to convey?
It's a really poignant observation. You know, it reminds us that even with these established rituals, the spirit and the essence of those practices can kind of evolve over time. So perhaps Anas was emphasizing the importance of maintaining the sincerity and the devotion that really characterized prayer during the Prophet's time. It's easy to get caught up in the outward forms of worship and lose sight of the inner connection. That truly matters.
It's a really powerful reminder to kind of check in with our own practice. And make sure we're not just going through the motions, but truly engaging with our hearts and minds.
Absolutely.
So speaking of engaging with our bodies, Hadiths 508 and 509 provide some really specific instructions on how to conduct oneself during prayer.
So these hadiths kind of shed light on the importance of mindfulness and reverence, even in the smallest details of prayer. For instance, Hadith 508 addresses spitting, which might seem like a kind of trivial matter, but it actually speaks volumes about the sanctity of prayer. So the Prophet, peace be upon him, instructed Muslims not to spit in front of them or to their right during prayer, but to their left or under their foot.
So it's fascinating how even something like spitting is given such specific instructions. What do you think is the significance of that?
Well, I think it really highlights the respect and reverence that should accompany prayer. You know, the direction of prayer towards the Kaaba in Mecca, the Qibla, is considered sacred. So spitting in that direction would be seen as disrespectful. And it also emphasizes cleanliness and avoiding anything that might distract from the prayer itself. So it's about creating a pure and focused environment for connecting with the divine.
It's about being mindful of every action, every detail as part of this larger act of devotion.
Absolutely.
So it's not just about what we do with our bodies, but also how we do it.
Yeah.
With intention and awareness.
With intention.
And Hadith 509 kind of builds on this theme of mindfulness.
Okay.
It emphasizes the importance of performing prostrations correctly.
Okay.
So the Prophet, peace be upon him, advised against putting forearms flat.
Okay.
With elbows touching the ground.
Okay.
Comparing it to the posture of a dog.
Interesting.
So
this instruction emphasizes humility and submission.
Okay.
Prostration, placing your forehead on the ground, is a powerful expression of surrender to God.
Right.
So by performing this action with the correct posture, Muslims embody that humility and acknowledge their dependence on the divine. So it's not about mimicking animalistic behavior, but about striving for excellence in our worship.
Right.
And recognizing the sanctity of these physical movements.
It's a reminder that prayer is a holistic experience engaging our bodies, our minds, and our spirits. It's about embodying our faith in every aspect of the prayer.
Absolutely.
Now, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier.
Okay.
About the potential for variations in practice.
Yeah.
So Hadith 518 talks about the Prophet, peace be upon him, praying 8 rakat for the Zuhr and Asr prayers, and 7 for Maghrib and Isha in Medina.
Okay.
Now, I know the usual number of rakat for these prayers is different.
It is typically Zuhr and Asrs consist of 4 rakat each, while Maghrib has 3 and Isha has 4.
Okay.
And just as a reminder for our listeners, a rakat is a unit of prayer consisting of a specific sequence of movements and recitations.
Okay, so it's interesting to see that he might have prayed additional rak'ah in certain situations.
Yeah.
So it makes you wonder what those situations might have been.
It does.
So the scholar Ayub speculates that these might have been rainy nights.
Okay.
Anas agrees. So do you think the weather played a role?
I think it's definitely a possibility.
Okay.
We see throughout the hadiths that the Prophet was responsive to the circumstances around him, adapting his practices as needed.
Yeah.
So perhaps these additional rak'ah were a way of intensifying prayer during times of need, seeking solace and guidance from the divine.
It's a reminder that prayer is not this rigid, unchanging ritual. But a dynamic and adaptable practice.
Yeah.
It can evolve and respond to the changing circumstances of life.
Absolutely.
And speaking of adaptability, let's revisit the topic of Isha prayer.
Okay.
And its variable timing. We talked about this a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
But Hadiths 541 and 542 offer further insights into the Prophet's practice of delaying Isha prayer, sometimes significantly.
Okay. These hadiths really highlight the Prophet's sensitivity to the needs of the community. So in Hadith 541, even in the early days of Islam, when the community was smaller and more closely knit, the Prophet delayed the prayer to the point where even Umar, known for his punctuality and discipline, was surprised. And the reason given was that the women and children had fallen asleep.
That's so sweet.
So it shows this incredible consideration for the most vulnerable members of the community.
He didn't want to burden them by holding the prayer too late.
Exactly.
That's really nice.
It speaks volumes about his compassion and understanding.
Yeah, and in Hadith 542, we have this fascinating account of Abu Musa and his companions who traveled to Medina and waited until the middle of the night for the Isha prayer with the Prophet.
Wow.
So
it's dedication.
Yeah, and the Prophet acknowledges their patience, and he calls it a blessing from God.
Wow.
That they were able to pray at such a late hour.
And it's powerful.
So make you wonder about the spiritual significance of praying at unusual times.
It does.
Right? There's like a heightened sense of devotion or reward when prayer is performed outside of the customary time frame.
It's a fascinating question.
It is.
Perhaps there's a deeper level of commitment and sincerity when one chooses to pray at a time that's inconvenient or challenging. You know, it could be seen as a form of spiritual discipline, pushing yourself beyond the limits of comfort. To deepen their connection with God.
It's about going the extra mile.
Yeah.
Making a conscious choice to prioritize prayer, even when it's not easy.
Absolutely.
It's a beautiful testament to the power of faith and devotion. Speaking of prioritizing prayer.
Yeah.
Remember Hadith 543, where the Prophet disliked sleeping before Isha and talking after it.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. It speaks to the importance of creating a space for reflection and contemplation. Around the act of prayer.
Right.
So sleeping before Isha might hinder the quality of the prayer.
Okay.
Make you drowsy and less attentive, talking after Isha.
Right.
Especially about worldly matters.
Yeah.
Could disrupt that peaceful state of mind that's cultivated through prayer.
So it's about being mindful of our actions and how they impact our spiritual state.
It's about creating an environment that supports that connection with God, both before and after the actual prayer.
So we've seen how the prophet, peace be upon him, adapted the timing of Isha based on the needs of the community and even his own practices.
Yeah.
But Hadith 544 provides a little bit more of a concrete time frame.
Okay.
It mentions that the prophet used to offer Isha prayer between the disappearance of twilight and the end of the first third of the night.
Okay.
So it gives us at least a general guideline.
Yeah, general guideline.
Even though we know it was often delayed. But then we have this interesting detail about Ibn Umar's approach to Isha prayer.
Okay.
He didn't mind praying it earlier or delaying it.
Okay.
But he was afraid of oversleeping and missing the prayer altogether.
It's a practical concern.
It is.
And it highlights the balance between communal practices and individual circumstances.
So Ibn Umar, while acknowledging the flexibility and the timing of Isha, also understood his own tendencies.
Right.
And took steps to ensure he didn't miss the prayer due to oversleeping.
It's a reminder that we need to be self-aware and adapt our practices to fit our own needs and limitations. It's not about blindly following a rule. It's about finding a way to make it work for our individual lives.
It's about finding that sweet spot between tradition and practicality.
Right.
And then in Hadith 545, we have this account where the prophet delays the Isha prayer so late that people fall asleep and wake up multiple times.
Oh, my goodness.
Before he finally emerges to lead the prayer.
That's interesting. And what's interesting is that the prophet actually explains this delay.
Okay.
He says that if he hadn't considered the hardship, it would cause his followers, he would have ordered them to pray at that late hour.
So it's almost like he's suggesting that there's a particular spiritual significance to that time of night, but he's mindful of the burden it would place on the community.
It really highlights his compassion and understanding of human nature.
He's prioritizing their well-being over his own desire to pray at that specific time.
It's an inspiring example of leadership, balancing personal piety with communal responsibility.
And there's this vivid detail about the prophet coming out with water trickling from his head.
Wow.
Indicating that he might have been engaged in intense supplication.
Yeah.
Or other spiritual practices.
That's amazing.
During the delay.
It really paints this picture of deep devotion and commitment.
A willingness to push himself spiritually, even as he considers the needs of his followers.
Exactly.
So Hadiths 546 and 574 provide even more examples of the prophet delaying Isha. Sometimes until midnight. Or even later. And he actually reassures those who've been waiting, acknowledging their perseverance, and highlighting the unique spiritual atmosphere of late-night prayer.
It's almost like these late-night prayers offered a different kind of connection with God, a more intimate and personal experience.
So it makes you wonder if there's something special about praying at times when the world is asleep. And distractions are minimal.
It allows for a deeper level of focus and contemplation.
It's about finding those moments of stillness and solitude where we can connect with the divine like a deeper level.
Okay, so we've talked about the prophet's practice of delaying Isha. But what about praying early in the morning, particularly Fajr? We've already touched upon the importance of Fajr prayer and its timing before dawn. But Hadiths 549 and 550 provide some more specific details about the prophet's routine regarding this prayer. They mention that the prophet would have a pre-dawn meal known as suhu, and then stand for the Fajr prayer after a short interval. Just enough time to recite a few verses of the Quran.
So it's interesting to see how he incorporated this meal into his pre-prayer routine.
It suggests a recognition of the need to nourish the body before engaging in spiritual practice.
It's about being mindful of both our physical and spiritual needs, creating a balance that supports our overall well-being.
Absolutely.
And we see Sahih bin Sa'd's dedication in Hadith 5551.
Okay.
Where he's eager to join the Prophet for Fajr prayer, even after having suhoor.
It highlights the importance of prioritizing prayer, even when other activities might seem pressing.
Right. It's a reminder that our connection with God should be a constant in our lives, woven into our daily routines.
It's not something we do just when it's convenient. Right. It's an integral part of who we are.
It's about making that conscious effort to put our faith first, even when life gets busy.
Absolutely.
Now let's talk about a series of hadiths that emphasize the prohibition of praying at certain times, specifically sunrise and sunset.
Okay.
So hadiths 555, 556, 557, 558, 559, and 560 all address this restriction.
It's a very clear and consistent message.
It is a clear message.
Throughout these hadiths, the Prophet explicitly forbids prayer during these specific periods.
And Hadith 562 provides further clarification by stating that these prohibited periods are after Fajr until sunrise and after Az until sunset.
Okay.
So it really draws a clear boundary around these times.
It emphasizes the importance of respecting these sacred times of transition between day and night, refraining from formal prayer during those periods.
So it makes you wonder about the reasoning behind this prohibition.
It does.
Right. Perhaps it stems from a reverence for the sun and its movements.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's about acknowledging the symbolic significance of these transitional moments.
Those are definitely thought-provoking possibilities.
Yeah.
Maybe it's about recognizing the awe-inspiring power of nature.
Right.
And acknowledging that certain moments are best reserved for contemplation and reflection.
Right.
Rather than formal prayer.
It's a reminder that our spiritual practices should be in harmony with the natural world, respecting the rhythms and the cycles of creation.
Absolutely.
We're not separate from nature.
Right.
We're part of it.
We're a part of it.
And our worship should reflect that understanding.
And Hadith 563 offers a helpful perspective from Ibn Umar. He states that he prays as he saw his companions praying, but he avoids prayer at sunset and sunrise. So it suggests that this prohibition was a well-established practice among the early Muslims, passed down from the Prophet himself.
It reinforces the idea that these timings weren't arbitrary, but rooted in this deep understanding of the spiritual significance of sunrise and sunset.
Absolutely. And it's important to remember that this restriction applies specifically to formal prayer. It doesn't preclude other forms of worship or remembrance of God during these times.
So it's not about avoiding all forms of spiritual practice, but specifically refraining from formal prayer.
It's a nuanced understanding that highlights the importance of finding the appropriate expression of our faith at different times of the day.
It's about being mindful of the context and choosing the form of worship that best aligns with the specific time and situation.
Exactly. Sometimes it's about formal prayer. Other times it's about quiet contemplation or simply being present in the moment.
Now, we've talked about the prohibition of prayer at sunrise and sunset, but there's another interesting set of hadiths that discuss a different kind of prayer-related restriction. The 2 rakat after Asr. So hadiths 561, 564, 565, 566, and 567 present.
Wow.
Different perspectives on this practice. It's a great example of how even seemingly straightforward aspects of prayer can give rise to different interpretations.
It really highlights the complexity of interpreting religious texts and practices.
There's not always a clear-cut answer. And even the earliest Muslims had differing opinions on certain matters. So Hadith 561 features Muawiyah, who states that he never witnessed the Prophet performing these 2 rakat after Asr, and that the Prophet had explicitly forbidden them. But then we have Hadiths 564, 565, 566, and 567, all of which present Aisha, the Prophet's wife, as a staunch advocate for these 2 rakat. She vehemently insists that the Prophet never missed them.
Interesting.
Even towards the end of his life, when standing for prayer became difficult.
It's a stark contrast to perspectives.
It's almost like Muawiyah and Aisha are representing 2 different schools of thought on this issue.
What's important here is not to get caught up in trying to determine who's right or wrong, but to recognize that these differing viewpoints highlight the complexities of interpreting these religious texts and practices. It's not always about finding a definitive answer, but about understanding the reasoning behind different viewpoints and recognizing that there can be multiple valid perspectives within a faith tradition.
It's a reminder that Islam isn't monolithic.
Exactly.
There's room for different interpretations and practices, as long as they're grounded in the Quran and Sunnah.
For sure.
It's about approaching these differences with respect and understanding.
Absolutely.
Recognizing that we can learn from each other's perspectives.
I think that's a key takeaway.
Yeah.
From this whole discussion about prayer times, there's this balance to be struck between adhering to established guidelines and adapting to individual circumstances.
Yeah.
The hadiths provide a framework, but it's up to each individual to find their own path within that framework.
Right.
Always striving for sincerity and devotion in their connection with God.
It's about making prayer a meaningful and integrated part of our lives, not just a set of rules to be followed blindly.
Absolutely.
So with that in mind, let's move on to another important aspect of prayer.
Okay.
What happens when we miss a prayer?
Yeah, it's a universal experience,
It is.
We all have those moments where life gets in the way or, we simply forget and prayer might get pushed aside. The important thing is that we recognize that and get back on track as soon as possible.
Exactly. And luckily, Islam provides some guidance on what to do.
It does.
When you miss a prayer.
Yeah.
Hadith 571 says that if someone forgets a prayer, they should pray it as soon as they remember.
It's a pretty straightforward solution.
Yeah, it is.
There's no need for elaborate rituals or complicated atonements.
It's a message of reassurance and practicality.
It is.
Islam recognizes that, we're human. We make mistakes.
We do.
And the key is to...
just
acknowledge those mistakes and...
acknowledge them and make amends.
Yeah, and make amends.
In a simple and straightforward way.
Yeah, and the Hadith quotes a verse from the Quran emphasizing that prayer is established for the remembrance of God.
It's a beautiful reminder that prayer isn't just about fulfilling an obligation.
Right.
It's about nurturing our connection with the divine.
It's about keeping God at the forefront of our minds, remembering him throughout the day.
Yeah.
And seeking his guidance and forgiveness.
It's about weaving that awareness into the fabric of our lives.
It's a beautiful concept, integrating that mindfulness into our everyday experiences. Speaking of remembering, I want to bring up Hadiths 568 and 570.
Okay.
These Hadiths recount incidents where even the Prophet, peace be upon him, and his companions missed prayers due to unforeseen circumstances.
Wow.
So it's really relatable. It shows that even the most devout individuals can face challenges in maintaining their prayer routine.
It reminds us that life happens.
Yeah.
And sometimes things get in the way, even for the most dedicated among us. The important thing is that we recognize those situations, make amends as best we can, and move forward with a renewed commitment to our practice.
In Hadith 568, Buraida, a companion of the Prophet, emphasizes the importance of praying Asr early, especially on a cloudy day when it's easy to lose track of time.
Right.
He even quotes the Prophet saying that whoever misses the Asr prayer will have all their good deeds annulled.
Wow.
It's a pretty strong warning.
It is. It highlights the gravity of missing this particular prayer. But it's important to remember the context of the statement. It's not meant to instill fear or guilt, but to emphasize its significance and encourage Muslims to be mindful of its timing.
It's about prioritizing prayer, even when life gets busy or distractions arise.
And then in Hadith 570, we see a situation where both the Prophet and his companions missed the Asr prayer. Because they were engaged in the Battle of the Trench.
Wow.
So you can imagine the intensity and chaos of battle causing them to lose track of time.
So it shows that even in the most demanding and unpredictable situations, prayer remains
a priority.
A priority.
But there are times when circumstances beyond our control might prevent us from praying on time.
And what's striking is that as soon as they realize their omission, they immediately make up for the missed prayer. Even though the sun is already set.
Wow.
They don't make excuses.
They don't delay.
They don't delay. They simply prioritize their prayer.
They get right to it.
As soon as they're able.
It demonstrates their unwavering commitment to fulfilling those religious obligations.
It's a powerful lesson.
It is.
For us to learn from.
Life is full of unexpected twists and turns.
Yes, it is.
But our dedication to prayer should remain steadfast.
And it's interesting to think about how these themes of consistency and flexibility, and even making up for missed prayers, all tie back to that broader concept of balance.
Absolutely.
That we were talking about earlier.
It's about finding that equilibrium between structure and adaptation, recognizing that there's a time and a place for everything.
Right.
Islam provides that framework for prayer,
Yeah.
but it also recognizes that we're human and our lives are constantly in flux.
Yeah.
It's up to each individual to find their own way within that framework,
Okay.
striving for consistency
Right.
while also being adaptable to life's ever-changing circumstances.
It's a beautiful concept. It reminds us that our faith should be a source of strength and comfort, not a source of stress or rigidity.
This deep dive has only scratched the surface.
It really has.
There's so much more to explore within the vast world of Hadith.
But we hope this has given you a taste of the richness and complexity within these texts.
For sure.
And prompted you to delve deeper into the fascinating world of Islamic tradition.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us on this journey of discovery.
Until next time, may peace and blessings be upon you.